Worst flooding for 80 years. Food is scarce in places affected and water supplies contaminated. Health workers say they now fear the risk of diarrhea and cholera outbreaks, particularly among children. The UN agency UNICEF says more than 1 million youngsters now need emergency aid. Although the rains have stopped for now, huge swathes of northwest Pakistan remain submerged.
All right, now
despite the massive relief effort, there's been criticism of the government response in some areas.
But to truly set this up for a conversation on natural earth changes with Michael in just a few. So we also see flooding in China. And we see the death toll in China, landslides extending about 1,000 right now. The landslides and floods were triggered by torrential rains that hit key areas last Saturday. So this has been going on about a week now. Bill, we'll go ahead and bring up the next track, the final track of the evening, which documents the flooding taking place in China.
Complaints help has been slow to arrive. Pakistan's military says it has 30,000 troops and dozens of helicopters.
These are the grieving family members of those who died in the mammoth mudslide. This little town shocked by the unexpected disaster. Some of its residents completely shattered at the loss of loved ones. The entire main street is buried in meters-high mounds of earth as soldiers of the People's Liberation Army dig fast to find both the living and the dead. We found Ma Yun Hui standing atop what was once the home of relatives.
I came here the second morning. This is my sister-in-law's home, and there were 9 people in the family, including 4 children, who are all buried beneath.
Some survivors have been found among the rubble, but those sitting on the sidelines have long given up hope.
Last but not least, before Michael comes in the studio, we need to talk about what's going on in the Yellow Sea. Our follow-up report to the building U.S. tensions between, the United States and China, for that matter, also taking place in the South China Sea. Remember our conversation last night comparing solar cycles and, of course, times of war. In graphic 34, we see that the U.S.-Korean drills, the war games taking place, have begun anew. They've started their drills over, and the Chinese, in graphic 35, are involved in an Air Force drill. And so, according to China, they are preparing for the United States to attack in these drills. These are not joint drills between the United States and China. These are war game drills where they're simulating attacking one another over this building conflict in the north, the Korean peninsula, which is very close to the Sea of Japan, where the United States currently is running their war game drills. China has responded by unleashing a missile that is said to be able to travel over 900 miles inland. And it is precision guided. That means it can follow its target and move around some sort of a missile defense system. And so we are definitely seeing the buildup of this. In this report that you're seeing here, we have a new breaking news development. The Chinese PLA has taken a bolder, more vocal stance against the U.S. as time goes on, right on cue, just like clockwork. Chinese editorial takes aim at U.S. China is keeping up with its barrage of words directed at the U.S., this time with a fiery editorial written by a general in the country's state-run military newspaper, which calls for the country to be prepared to respond if it is attacked by the U.S. According to Major General Lu Yuan, if someone does not harm me, I won't harm him. If someone harms me, I must harm him. There's a lot of talk right now about the Chinese feeling that they have to hold up face and prepare for an all-out war with the United States. So these are all developments, breaking developments that we will continue to bring you in the weeks to come. Last but not least, 2 brief updates on the war on Afghanistan. They have discovered more oil, 1.8 billion barrels. This is in line with the other report that talked about the trillions in natural resources, lithium, copper, gold, that have also been discovered in Afghanistan. In the next report, we now see that about 234%, it's up the amount of troops that are going AWOL. And so with that, though, let's talk more about these natural cycles with Micheal Sunanda. He's a regular guest on Coast to Coast AM. He's been on with Art Bell. He's been on with George Norrie. He's also been on Red Ice Creations and a number of other radio shows around the world. He's built and designed hundreds of geodesic dome models in teaching toys. He found the secret Da Vinci geometry codes in his artwork. We'll talk about that in a little bit, based on spirals in nature and platonic polyhedrons. Micheal is a teacher of permaculture and Gaia ecology about whole energy patterns of Earth weather, climate systems, and natural fractal geometry, organic life. And of course, if you look up on his website, if you look up on the screen here before you, you can go ahead and write down his website. This is me and Micheal talking back in 2008. Tonight is actually the first time that we are meeting together. So Micheal, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, aloha.
So you just came up from Eugene?
Yeah.
Okay. You didn't bike all the way up here in the heat, did you?
I'm not a hero. I'm a meditator.
You're a meditator?
Yeah.
So I read your bio, but it's really a brief snapshot on decades and decades of research. So give us a little bit more information about yourself.
Okay, well, in 1971, I was a school teacher in the 60s and dropped out. I didn't really fit into the school teaching thing, and they asked me to leave, so I left. And then I started getting into encounter groups. In the 60s, 70s, encounter groups were very popular about how to be present and cooperate with each other. We weren't taught that. We were taught to obey and play games.
Sure.
So I learned encounter groups for a couple years, and whole weekends just sitting in circles, sharing and playing and kind of and then I got a master's degree in Dreiker's family counseling, which is a counseling or psychology of cooperative parenting. Mm-hmm. And that is almost unheard of right now. Dreiker's died in the 70s, but we continued it on. And then I found that yuppies, or which I was for a while, don't know how to cooperate. Mm-hmm. So I became a hippie while meditating and doing yoga and so on. So that was the condensed story from the 70s. And then I joined a commune and we did cooperative parenting with the kids. And then another family I was in, the woman, I wasn't the father, had 3 babies underwater at home with the father catching them. And then I moved to Hawaii to live in the bush to learn permaculture and to get my instincts back. Because as a white people or European city people don't have their instincts. Mm-hmm. In fact, science doesn't even believe in instincts, human instincts. Fight or flight was Darwin's brilliant thing about instincts. Empire, very empire. Yeah. So that's, and then Bucky Fuller. I met Bucky Fuller in 71, 72, and then became a student and then a teacher of it. I was immediately enthralled because it's the geometry of nature. Mostly, you would say, well, like domes, snowflakes. Mm-hmm. But all crystals, in fact, most cells, DNA is geodesic. So it's a geometry of nature. But what are squares? Are they in nature? Do you find squares in nature?
Can't say I do.
No, they're hard to find.
Yeah, that 6-sided shape, hidden messages in water. The author of that book has touched so many people around the world when they did these studies on, meditating or thinking love towards one jar of water and negative emotions towards another. Yeah. And it was very interesting to see that 6-sided geometric shape, which we see in nature, manifests itself in the water molecule.
Yeah, from prayers and intentions. Yeah, and so it seems to be magic. For materialist people, it seems to be magic. There was a one.
Let's bring that back up. This is some of the spiral artwork that's on your Facebook page.
Yeah, this is a Mendelbrot set and a Tree of Life combined. So we overlay a lot of those. And if you want to show some more there, we'll flip through there. This is a spiral torus, the round thing, and then the spiral field behind it. So we got the layers. And everything in nature is layers. Mm-hmm. I mean, you wouldn't really say air is layers, but there is layers of air.
Tell me about some of the things we can learn from looking at images like this, sacred geometry, to integrate into our world today.
Well, there's 2 main sources. Nature, if you gaze at nature, not just look for something. Like, for example, these patterns are very common in permaculture. So what we look for in permaculture is these patterns of growth. Like that one right there is very much like the flowers and the herbs and how they look. So these were visions that I had that I drew. I had a vision, then I woke up and then drew. It was different. But here's another one. There's 2 of them there. So sometimes I combine the 2 of them to give a yin-yang effect. Mm-hmm. So we can see there's 2 different kinds of spirals there. And in nature, in flowers and nuts and birds and all these things that are kind